Start your day with Quaker Protein Instant Oatmeal. The instant oatmeal ready to help you tackle whatever your day brings. Like wrangling your toddler into their car seat. That was fun. Coaching your 6th graders soccer team. Go girls! And carrying all the groceries in one trip. Whew. Try Quaker Protein Instant Oatmeal, granola, and bars. Great taste and a good source of protein. Quaker, bring out the good.
New Maybelline Serum Lipstick. Maybe it's not just lipstick. It's lush color with endless possibilities. It's serum infused with a hyaluronic acid and oil blend for 8-hour plumping moisture in tone-enhancing shades. It's more than the shade. It's who's wearing it. You. New Maybelline Serum Lipstick.
Maybe it's Maybelline.
Unfiltered discussions, unexpected guests. No topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the human condition, personal anxieties, and so much more. The only talk show of its kind in the world. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Hi, welcome in. We're going to cover a lot of important topics for you on the show tonight. Here are some of them. How would you like to meet one of the greatest scientific minds of our entire generation, a researcher boldly answering humanity's most urgent question? How often do we actually pass gas? Halfway through the hour, we'll explore the invention of smart underwear by that very same researcher. The underwear itself, it measures your flatulence. Yes, seriously, for science. Then after that, in the US, the White House and RFK released new diet guidelines. One reporter ate that diet. Her experiment went viral and the internet was upset. We'll have her on the show to find out exactly what she ate and what people were saying about it. That'll be towards the end of the hour. Those are some of the topics we'll cover. There will be more. You will learn more, but for now, let's dive in.
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
Dating apps, they're funky. They're like a weird shopping exercise. You swipe, you filter, you reject, you repeat, all in the name of being compatible with someone. But what if this whole system is broken and attraction isn't that predictable? Well, that's what we're going to discuss here with Paul Eastwick, a psychology professor at UC Davis. Check out his book, Bonded by Evolution, The New Science of Love and Connection. Paul, what a joy it is to have you.
Thank you so much for having me back, David.
These dating apps, I feel like they're out-competing each other in filtering, age, weight, hair color, political preference. Like somehow if you can just filter down your perfect match to this exact, script that you'll just find love. Why is this wrong?
Yeah, so this is not my favorite feature of the apps. And look, the apps do introduce people to folks that you never would have had a chance to meet before. But where I think they falter is where they provide people a sense that you can cull that sometimes very vast pool to something more manageable that looks exactly like what you would have drawn up for yourself on paper. That there's the perfect partner waiting out there for you who has a list of attributes along the lines of what you describe. But the challenge is that when we try to study this topic experimentally, when we actually look at people's filters and whether or not they'd actually end up liking those folks more once they meet face to face, it kind of ends up being more or less of a coin flip. So in general, the filter's not my favorite feature of what the apps are doing.
We've spoken about this in the past, but let's reiterate it. How good are we? How good am I? How good are you at actually knowing what we're attracted to? How good are we at saying these filters will produce our perfect partner versus people who have the perfect partner? Did they match their checklist, I guess, is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, we don't do all that well. Now, look, if I were to ask you to draw up your perfect partner, you would certainly sit here and list some attributes, and many of those would be positive attributes. But the problem is that the attributes you're coming up with, it's not like they're uniquely special to you. And the thought experiment that I like to describe, we have real experiments that fit this. But the thought experiment here is, well, imagine what would happen if, here you are using using your filters, and all of a sudden we have, some sort of Freaky Friday situation where my filters get mapped on top of your filters and your filters get mapped on top of mine. And now the women I'm seeing are the women that David would have liked. Well, the thing is, ultimately, it probably wouldn't have mattered. I would have been just as likely to like the women once I meet them face to face if I'd been using your filters rather than mine. So, yeah, some of them are filtering for quote unquote good things, but they're not like idiosyncratically appealing to the user.
Well, let's talk about these filters. Things like hobbies, someone's politics, their personality, their hair color, their age, all of these things. Why doesn't that predict whether I'm going to click with someone? Why am I potentially likely to like someone whose hobbies are so different than me, even though you might say, hey, they have nothing in common?
Yeah, it feels so intuitive that we should click with people when we have more rather than fewer things in common. But I think what we underappreciate is that people, especially when they're having face-to-face conversations, we largely start with the assumption that we would like these conversations to go well. We would like them to be pleasant rather than unpleasant. We would like them to be smooth. And what we're often trying to do, and this is even true on awkward first dates, is we're trying to find points of connection. Now, it can be challenging if you don't find anything to talk about with somebody else. But many times, the things that we can find to chat about are very small. They're not actually all that central to who we are as a person. Now, if we're thinking about then what cascades out into a long-term relationship, okay, fine. You found a way to talk about, French cinema together, bully for you, but that's not going to predict whether you're going to fit well together in the long run. But the thing is, there are so many things out there that people can build around as they're forming a relationship. And this is why we often like to think of the whole compatibility process. It's something that people are constructing over time rather than something that they're finding by swiping the right people on the apps.
But dating apps encourage this quick judgment, this swiping. Are we scrambling our brains psychologically when we spend hours swiping through thousands of profiles?
I think, yeah, because I think really the problem here is that it's so much choice that we feel like we have to do something to narrow it down to, something that's going to be manageable. But this does have downstream consequences because in any environment where people feel like they have too much choice, there's just too many options for them to consider, they're a little bit less likely to commit to any one option. This is very much a shopping mentality that I'm describing. And in fact, these studies were originally conducted at supermarkets. And to the extent that we've turned dating into something approximating a supermarket, well, we shouldn't be surprised that now people are treating it this way. And so you feel like there are all these options out there. Well, you're less likely to try to put in the work to make a relationship happen with one particular person.
Is being compatible with someone more like a dart throw? Is it more like a chaotic thing where you just catch a glimpse of someone? You're like, oh my goodness, this could be a potential partner. Is it something that develops over time? We're bad at doing it now. Apps are not helping. After the break, I do want to talk to you about how to do it right. But what is it about what we're doing the way we're doing it now that is so wrong?
Yeah, and look, I want to be clear too. This is the vanguard of the science right now. This is what we're all out here trying to figure out. We know compatibility is important. Just where is it coming from if it's not coming from a shared sense of similarity? I do think a lot of it is chaotic, as you described. It requires a certain amount of luck, but we can adjust that luck a little bit with certain techniques. We'll get into some of this in the next segment, but there are various ways that we can guide conversations to topics that are more rather than less likely to create connection. And I think, too, it's worth considering the possibility that we could be compatible with more people than we realize if we had enough time with them. And I'm fond of pointing out that, when we were all getting together on the African savannah 100,000 or, 1,000,000 years ago, you actually didn't have that many options. Yet you were going to get to know these people over time. And that at least affords some opportunities to find compatibility with one person. Sometimes that's all it takes.
I wonder who I was on the savannah. Like, I feel like I channel Larry David when I date. You know, I'm awkward, I'm nebbish, I'm weird. Who would I have been on the savannah? Like the awkward hunter is like, oh, I don't know if I should throw the spear. I don't know.
I think you would have been the entertainment in the evenings. I mean,
The
right?
jester?
Yeah, sure. No, but it's important. I mean, right? We need group cohesion. Like, we've had a hard day. You know, who's going to provide the entertainment there?
That's probably how I survived. Thanks, great grandfather. Look, you were quoted as saying dating apps are mostly a waste of time. I'm not sure you actually meant that when you said it in a recent interview.
Filters. The filters are mostly a waste of time. The apps, mixed bag.
But if this whole business of dating apps is causing us, in some cases, with filters, to do it wrong, when we come back from the break, we'll talk about how to do it right, how to actually make a connection, how to actually find love these days. That is the great question we'll attempt to answer with psychology professor at UC Davis, Paul Eastwick, after the break.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
This episode is brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. No matter how you do game day, on the couch, in the crowd, or manning the snack table, Athletic Brewing fits right in. With a full lineup of non-alcoholic beer styles, you can enjoy bold flavors all game long. No hangovers, no buzz, no subbing out for water in the second half. Stock the fridge for tip-off with a variety of non-alcoholic craft styles available at your local grocery store or online at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer, fit for all times.
The last show with David Cooper. Procrastinate your life away with us.
If love isn't hiding inside an algorithm or a filtered profile on a dating app, how does it actually happen? Where does it happen? Maybe the happiest couples weren't perfect matches, just two people who found each other, figured it out together. So let's find out how you should meet people if dating apps are in fact somewhat broken. Here with psychology professor at UC Davis, Paul Eastwick. Check out his book, Bonded by Evolution, The New Science of Love and Connection, available wherever books are sold. Paul, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Before the break, we were chatting about how dating app filters may not achieve what we want them to achieve or think they will achieve, but it really does beg the question, how do we find love these days? If I were on the dating market, if my girlfriend dumped me, which, let's be honest, she probably will someday, how would I go about finding love if I had swipe fatigue, or if the apps weren't working for me, or if I just thought they were a bad idea because I heard people like you talk about them?
Okay, so if we're setting the apps aside for a moment and we're going to try dating in other ways, I want to remind people of the existence of small groups of friends and acquaintances.
Wait, what are those? I've never heard of that.
So
in person, are you talking about? Not on a chat line?
In person, not even on a chat line. It's this old radical idea where people would get together, often over a shared activity or interest, on multiple occasions. And look, in school context, workplace context, sometimes friends and acquaintances just get together because it's fun. And so to the extent that people once had networks like these and they have let them atrophy, and this has happened at all ages. It is true that the young folks today, high schoolers, they're not going out and hanging out in person as much as prior generations did. But this is true for the rest of us as well. We're not hanging out in person to the same extent. If you are dating, there is real wisdom in looking up what is in your area that is an intramural sports league, an improv class, a cooking class, any kind of class you might want to take, any kind of interest where, and this is important, you would get to interact with the same people on multiple occasions, because that is an environment that pulls for less of this market-based winner-take-all, the hot people dominate all the right swipes. Because when we get to know each other in person, we start disagreeing about who we'd want to date. And for many of us, that's a good thing. That means that somebody is going to think you're especially desirable in that smaller group if you give them enough time.
You know, there are ugly theories about celebrities dating each other because they're superficial or they're only interested in their public profile or normal people won't understand what it means to be a Hollywood actor. But I have a theory that they just date each other because that's their social circle. That's who they hang around. That's who they meet.
Yes. I mean, it's like, it seems so obvious, and yet I think we still underestimate it. The pull of proximity. I mean, this is a study that I love citing. It was conducted several years ago, but it showed that if somebody is randomly assigned to sit next to you in a classroom, you are 20 times more likely to be friends with that person than anybody else in that same classroom. 20 times is enormous. These proximity effects really matter. So, of course, if we're like shooting a bunch of scenes together, director keeps telling us to do it again, we're going to develop not only a familiarity with each other, but also a set of in-jokes, a set of rituals, the eye roll that we give for the 20th take of this, very short piece of dialogue that the director wants us to keep doing. And this is how people connect with each other. When we aren't interacting with the same people repeatedly in person, we are missing all of this.
So if compatibility is not about, everyone meeting every line item on my checklist, it's something that gets kind of constructed over time. Is that something you've said?
Yeah, this is how we think about it, that it's something that two people are building. It's a lot of that, like in jokes, rituals, stories, and patterns kind of stuff. I mean, sometimes we even call it a microculture, that each relationship builds its own culture over time. When you're first meeting somebody over coffee, especially if it's like the same coffee place you usually go to, sharing the same stats and figures, that's not much of a private culture that you're creating there. That's an interview. But if people are spending time together, building those rituals and those in-jokes, that's often where a sense of compatibility comes from. It's the thing that makes another person start to feel irreplaceable is that, but now we have a history. And I don't know, you can be kind of cynical about that and be like, whatever, you just like married whoever was nearby. But I don't know, I think it's kind of beautiful. I think it's kind of great that this is what we do. We're creatures that attach. We're creatures that bond. And if we're there with other people in person, I think most of us are kind of primed to do it.
Okay, so I join a group centered around some activity. Maybe it's an improv class.
Yeah.
I meet someone and I see what I think are a million red flags, yellow flags. Is that the right mindset? Should we be looking at people for things to write off? Like, hey, Jimmy's a fan of the New England Launchers. Is that a basketball team? I don't follow sports. But I can't date a Launchers fan. Therefore,
fictional name for a basketball team.
What was that? It sounds weird calling it the gay hockey show, Heated Rivalry.
Oh, yeah. It's equally goofy. The team names are very goofy.
I'm Canadian and the show's on the air on the radio in Canada, so maybe I shouldn't admit this, but I was like, are these teams real?
No, the teams are not real.
But regardless, like people find silly red flags or what they call red flags to just write someone off. I'm not talking about major red flags like this person is mean. I'm talking about little things like, oh, his hair's too long.
Yeah, and this is one thing that I push back on too, maybe to some extent. I'm being a little reactionary here because I get it. Like if you go on a date with somebody and they're incredibly rude to the waiter, like, yeah, that's a turnoff. And I'm not trying to minimize that. But I would rather people are looking for reasons to like green flags. Like, oh, but you know what was so cool was when they the way that they told this story was so captivating, or they seemed like interested in my work in ways that most people aren't, or, anything that you can come away from an interaction thinking like, I haven't seen that everywhere. Like that was unique and different. I don't know. Those are the things that I would be excited about and would look to build around, to try to repeat, right? I mean, that's part of the thing too. I mean, sometimes, you click with somebody one moment and then the next time you meet them, you don't to the same extent. This totally happens. But I look for, the green flags, the moments of connection and try to repeat those.
Now, hobby groups, social clubs, it does sound old-fashioned, I gotta say.
Yeah, I know.
Why are these slow burn in-person environments so good for making attractive connections and attractiveness connections? That's not English, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Why are they so much better than dating apps? Like, what would be the bottom line on that?
Yeah, I think they're better for a few reasons. One is that when we know we're going to be seeing people on repeated occasions, we're less evaluative, like I'm interviewing you, and more like, hey, I want this interaction to go smoothly. I mean, it's just like an instinct people have. If I know that we're going to be at least a little bit interdependent, we're going to be in this improv class together, we might get paired up for, another exercise in the future, I kind of want this to go well. So I think that puts people in a good headspace to start. And then from there, I think what's really amazing about what people tend to do is that we can find things to like in people even when others don't see it. That is, it's not that we all have this true permanent value about how desirable we are. We come off differently to different people. And this becomes more and more true over time. I think this reflects something about our evolved condition. I think it reflects something about like, hey, a few million years ago, you had to pair up with somebody. And you couldn't be holding out for the quote unquote best. You had to find somebody and make it work with them. I think we're pretty good at doing that, but repeated interaction is core.
You can listen to more of Paul Eastwick on his podcast that he co-hosts called the Love Factually Podcast. Paul, it's been a joy having you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Paul Eastwick is a psychology professor at UC Davis. Oh, I'm so excited for what's up next. The scientist who invented smart underwear that tracks your gas. Yes, for real. And it's all in the name of science, as your gut microbiome might be busier than anyone thought before. It's the surprising science of gas in a moment.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
Sierra has all the best active and outdoor brands you need. From athletic stuff, like a full court pickup game, swish, to athlete-ish stuff, like a half-mile stroll. Get those steps in. And for morning hikes up the mountain trail, good pace. To nighttime ghost stories from the camping chair. What a twist. Whatever level of active, Sierra loves it all. Head to Sierra or Sierra.com for the brands you want at the prices that let you do it all. From athletic to athlete-ish, Sierra's got it.
We're here because your heightened awareness deserves heightened entertainment. The last show with David Cooper.
Aristotle, Galileo, Isaac Newton, Einstein. These are the scientific giants who expanded the boundaries of human knowledge. And tonight, we're going to add another name to that list. I am here, lucky, because one of the scientists who finally invented the smart underwear that measures your farts that you needed to have is here. Yes, really. And it's actually science we're going to discuss. I'm joined by microbiologist and professor at the University of Maryland, Brantley Hall, to discuss his new smart underwear. Brantley, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
I don't even know what to say. I'm beside myself that you have decided to come on the show. I'm not a smart technology person. I have a smartphone, but that's about it. I won't wear a watch. I won't wear a heart monitor. I won't do any of it. What you have created, I might get. If it were available. I'm not sure it is. Let's talk the fart counter underwear. Why did you create this? Why did you think to yourself, this is what science needs right now?
There's a huge gap in our understanding of intestinal gas. Very few studies have measured it objectively, and they involve very invasive methods like rectal tubes. So we needed a way to capture like the actual experience of intestinal gas in people's day-to-day life. So we developed our wearable device that snaps onto any underwear, and you can capture the daily patterns of human flatus for the first time.
So how often we fart a day? This is a serious medical question for any, radio regulators listening, trying to get me in trouble. Why do we need to know that? Side note, in the lab, is pulling the finger involved during any of the clinical trials?
Great question. So 1 in 5 people experience excess intestinal gas, and disorders like IBS are very common. But when a patient goes to their doctor, they just have to tell them, trust me, I have excess gas. And the doctor doesn't necessarily believe that, right? Because they don't have a objective baseline of whether the person's farting too much or not. So the patients feel unseen by their doctors. The doctors feel frustrated because they don't know whether the treatments they're prescribing are actually working or not. So there's a really big gap here.
So medicine didn't even have a baseline of what excessive gas even means. That's just a self-reported thing up until your study, is what you're saying.
Exactly. Like they're not objectively measuring it, so they're just relying on patient self-reports.
And the studies that got these reports, they basically got it wrong. The number that doctors had in mind was, 14 times a day. But they didn't actually know that. They didn't actually measure the things, did they?
They used rectal tubes to measure that one, but it was like a couple dozen people in the 1980s. So we have no modern measurements of flatness.
Okay, let's talk about this device, because this is probably the best use of technology. We talk about AI maybe ruining the world with super soldiers, this, that, and the other. But how does the tech work? Like, it's a little thing that snaps onto my underwear?
Totally. So it works with any underwear. Bring your own underwear. So it attaches adjacent to the perineum with a snap.
Okay.
It fits in that space. Most people find it comfortable. In fact, very few people have ever quit because it's uncomfortable. You actually, people quit because they forget about it. Then they wear it into the ocean, for example. So it's so comfortable, people forget about it. It sits there adjacent to the perineum and it measures the gas present in flatus. And what's really interesting is that farts are composed primarily of gut microbial metabolites, hydrogen and carbon dioxide. And we measure the hydrogen present in the fart.
So it's not just the number of times a day. The gas that's in there can tell us things about how healthy our stomachs and our gut, the bacteria in our stomach, our gut microbiome is?
Exactly. It can tell you how active the microbes are. So if you're farting a lot, your microbes are very active. If you're not farting a lot, they're not very active.
We want active microbes, don't we? But I guess we don't want overactive microbes.
I think you nailed it. You don't want overactive microbes. Fiber is really good and it increases microbial activity. But our question is, what if you could eat a healthy high fiber diet without experiencing excess intestinal gas? And we think, people will be able to eat healthier if that's the case. But right now we just don't know how to do that.
Okay, so we're figuring out health stuff, but we got to get back to the number of times a day. How many times a day is average? How many times a day is an outlier? What did you actually find out? Now that you're actually measuring the gas, getting these numbers new to science, what did you discover?
In our paper, we found 32 times a day was average. I don't know if that's going to maintain over the entire US population, but I can tell you a secret right now. In our study, more than 100 people have completed it, and the average is 38 right now. We've also seen someone farting more than 300 times a day.
Okay, guilty as charged. I didn't know someone must have inserted those in my underwear. I have IBS, by the way, so this hits close to home. Can I get one of these devices? Are you planning on going to market with them?
Yeah, we do have a company called Ventosity, has licensed the tech from the university. In the academic embodiment, it's called the Smart Underwear, and the commercial embodiment, it's called Ventos. But we're happy to send you one from the Human Flatus Atlas right now, so expect one in your mail.
Side note, I'm looking for a sponsor for this show, so this is a perfect. Let's talk about hydrogen. Let's talk about the gases. We have to make this a little bit educational. Is hydrogen, is the microbiome, is it basically like the system's exhaust pipe? There's fermentation going on. What composition of gas would I want to be a healthy individual?
That is a great way to put it. I've never heard someone say the exhaust pipe, but it is the exhaust of microbial metabolism. And so there's alternatives though. So gut microbes can reduce protons to produce hydrogen, or they could reduce other organic molecules that don't produce gas and have no symptoms associated. So we're trying to figure out how to switch from basically hydrogen production to something else that causes fewer GI symptoms.
Okay, let's talk about the variation in the study. What would be the lowest number of toots that you recorded in a day?
We caught someone farting only 3 times a day. And what's amazing is they were eating a healthy high fiber diet. So we have no idea how that's happening.
Oh my goodness.
Unknown to science.
There's a lot to study here. And do you think it's just because, your colleagues might have laughed at you in the past, or it's just too embarrassing, or no one dared to ask the big questions here? Why didn't we know this until now?
I think it's too embarrassing. I think people kind of couch it as bloating when they go to their doctor, but they're not willing to share that, they're farting all the time. So we want to kind of open up the conversation and say, it's okay to talk about farts. It's a normal part of your digestion, but also it might be excessive. And so when it's excessive, how do you know when it's excessive? How do you seek help? And we're trying to kind of help people understand that by setting a baseline of what's normal.
Speaking of that baseline, did you categorize people into different buckets? We've got the 3 times a day person. Maybe it's true. Maybe there's a woman out there who doesn't fart. Some women claim that. I don't believe it's true, having lived with women. Okay, so we got the infrequent person. We got the frequent person. What are the buckets?
Yeah, so we call the infrequent people Zen digesters, and we call the opposite spectrum hydrogen hyperproducers.
Oh my good, you guys are having fun with this.
Totally. And we have these medallions that we give to the top 3% to the bottom 3% of farters. So if you participate in the Human Flatus Atlas, one of the incentives is to be in the top 3%, you get this cool plaque.
Whoa, Brantley, Human Flatus Atlas?
Yes, sir. That's the name of our study.
Okay. Oh my goodness. That might be the most gloriously named scientific project I've ever heard. What does the atlas look like? Are you trying to map out people's gas across all of humanity?
Exactly. We're starting in the U.S., but we're going to go global.
I wonder if people around the world, like different diets, different, I don't know, bacteria that might be in local food might change it across the world. There's so many big, open, huge questions here.
You're exactly right. And the kind of the social aspect of farts is different. Like in Asia, there's less stigma to farting and they kind of just let them rip. But in the United States, there's a lot of stigma. So I think people are like holding it during work. So we've seen some people who like hold their farts during work. Then like they go home and they're farting a lot, or farting a lot on the weekend, but not during the weekdays. And that pattern is probably different in different countries based on the social stigma of farts.
Brantley, you must be a joy to have at dinner parties. Zooming out though, we've been joking. Well, mostly I've been joking. You've been communicating some real science here. Your research is really about understanding the gut microbiome in real time. Do you think measuring this, knowing more about us could help doctors, I don't know, diagnose gut diseases or personalized diets for people to make them healthy? Like, what are some of the implications of your research?
Yeah, that's a perfect question. It's totally our ambition. We don't have FDA approval to use this as a medical device at the moment, but we're trying to go there. And imagine a Fitbit for farts. A doctor would send a patient home with this device and they could know whether they're farting 200 times a day or 4 times a day. And they would be able to tell, what type of intervention might be appropriate. The 200 times a day person might benefit from a dietary intervention. The 4 times a day person, if they were experiencing, bloating and excess gas, might benefit from a mental health intervention.
Brantley, where can people find out more about you, your research, and the Human Flatus Atlas?
Our website is flatus.info. You can go there and enroll in the study.
Well, Brantley Hall is a microbiologist and professor at the University of Maryland. Brantley, it has been an utter joy having you on the show. In my mind, you're up there with Einstein, Newton. You're one of the great scientists of this century. Thank you for being here.
You're too kind. Thank you.
Coming up after the break, one reporter who tried the White House's RFK diet for a week. She started an internet war. So think about this. Why does what we eat make everybody so angry?
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
This episode is brought to you by Peloton. Break through the busiest time of year with the brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. With real-time guidance and endless ways to move, you can personalize your workouts and train with confidence, helping you reach your goals in less time. Let yourself run, lift, sculpt, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
We work hard to strike the right amount of intelligence and ignorance. The last show with David Cooper.
People have strong opinions about food. What's healthy, what's lazy, what's morally superior to eat. I am here with someone who did an eating experiment. She tried munching down on the White House's RFK-inspired diet for a week, and by doing so, she triggered a full-blown internet food fight. I'm here with reporter at Business Insider, Emily Stewart. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I gotta ask, for those who don't know what it is, before we get into what you did, what is the RFK diet and what does a normal day of eating it actually look like?
Well, I mean, to be fair, I feel like what I meant in this story is like the White House came out with a new food pyramid, right? Like you think of the food pyramid of like the 90s when it was like have all of the carbs that you would ever want, like at least in the US. And so they came out with a new food pyramid. RFK is obviously like the face of health and human services in the White House. And so basically kind of what it says is like lots of meat, lots of whole fats, lots of whole foods, which like isn't actually that kind of nuts, but it is like also, not really how everybody eats. Like, yes, we all aspire to eat like very healthy, et cetera, but like we also live like normal lives, and like having a steak and a whole milk for dinner is not where everybody is.
I'm just picturing my Jewish mother mixing milk and meat and her yelling at me if I had a glass of milk with a steak. I would not do that.
Oh, yeah, it's not loud.
But yeah, steak every night of the week. There's some things, guidance that have certainly changed in the messaging. What did you end up eating for that week?
So basically what I did is like, Because not only was I doing like the RFK diet, but also the agriculture secretary had said, like, you can accomplish this. Initially, she said $3 a meal. And she was like, you can have like a tortilla, a piece of chicken, and a piece of broccoli, which, okay, actually not that bad, but whatever. And then she said $15 a day. And so what I did was try to like accomplish this diet. So I like went to the grocery store and I bought like, I asked ChatGPT what to get because I'm like not the best cook. And like we did our best, but like so I basically wound up with like a lot of ground beef, which like I cannot eat for the foreseeable future, chicken, like rice, lentils, chickpeas. It seems to favor like cooked vegetables, so I got like frozen peas, and like frozen vegetables are actually still in my fridge. According to ChatGPT, like cheese was allowed, so I got some like cheddar cheese. And then I just like spent a week kind of like subsisting on this food. And like the truth of it was like it wasn't that hard. Like $15 a day, even in New York City, is not like the end all be all, but it was like very boring kind of. Like when I was like asking ChatGPT like what to do, at some point it was like, this is about maximal compliance, like not maximal pleasure. And like by day like 3 or 4, like I felt that one a little bit. Like I actually wound up reaching out to a friend who's a dietitian, being like, what should I do here? And she was like, you gotta lay off the ground beef. Like, what are we doing? But like, because I couldn't on my budget, like afford steak, you know, it would be like, oh, you can have like blueberries. And it's like, okay, but like if I have blueberries, like they're $10, like there goes a lot of my budget if I'm on like $115 a week. And so it was just like a fun little experiment of like, thinking about food and like how I eat and like how we all eat. And like also just like personally, I'm really not great at cooking. So like, by the end of the week, I was like pretty over it in terms of like eating different forms of like mush, basically.
So you follow the federal government's instructions, you do your best, you have fun with it.
Yes.
How do the people, the internet people, who I'm sure all were completely normal and sane and not bad at all, how did they respond to you doing this?
You know, truly, like, it was surprising. So the story went a little bit viral. I think, like, we have a comment section now on BI. There were, like, over 200 comments, and I did go through and I read them all. And, like, they were not as nice as one would hope. Somebody said I was, like, the Marie Antoinette of the 21st century. But people, like, have a lot of feelings about food, right? And so some people were very nice and were like, here's some cooking tips. You seem not great at this. Like, one man emailed to tell me I was stupid. And, like, you know, some people,
men emailing women to tell them they're stupid. That's the first I've ever heard that.
Right, very rare. But, you know, people have a lot of, like, feelings about food, whether it be, like, some of them thought I was not, like, trying hard enough. Some of them thought that I was biased, like, against the White House. Some of them thought I was biased for the White House. Like, it really has been, like, all over the map. And I think it was, like, an example of, like, we're also judgmental about food. You know, like, I remember as a kid, like, I would buy lunch at school and like other kids would make fun of me. And my mom would be like, people shouldn't care what you're eating. And it's like true, but it was like genuinely quite hurtful. And I think like people are just like weird about this kind of stuff. Like last week I published a follow-up story on this and I was like in the middle of McDonald's getting coffee because they have very good coffee. And like some lady had reached out to me on LinkedIn and like, God bless her, but to like argue with me about like whether calcium was like in whole milk or not. And I was just like, I don't know, man, like God bless. And also like, what are we doing here? Like people have a lot of feelings.
Why these reactions sound intense and odd? Why do you think food debates get people so oddly emotional compared to other daily habits? Like if you did a teeth brushing experiment based on what the dentists recommend, I don't think you'd have this reaction.
Yeah, I mean, I think like there's a lot of kind of like we treat food as like a moral type thing sometimes, right? Like we declare foods like good or bad. And like some of that's just like diet culture, but some of it's also like kind of this virtue signaling thing, right? If you think about like online, there's a lot of debate a lot of the time about like cooking at home versus like using DoorDash or Seamless or some sort of delivery service. And I think like some of it's just like we've kind of been trained to like this food is good, this food is bad. And it's like a little bit screwed up. And I think, you know, also it is something that like food is like a big part of our lives. Like we do have to decide what's for dinner literally every day for all of our lives. And like as much as we don't like think that we think about it, we do. And I think it's just like, I don't know, I think we're pretty like judgmental about it. Like I wound up calling some of the people who had like emailed me, and like they were genuinely like all pretty nice with like one exception. But like, I talked to one man out in Nevada, and he was like really doing some strict diet stuff that he's been doing for a decade of like all whole foods, makes his own bread, like literally does not even believe in like instant yeast type situation, like really do. But he kind of said, he was like, listen, if I go to a barbecue, like I'm gonna eat what's coming off the grill and not worry about it. And like, I do this for me. And like, that seemed like a very healthy way to be, of like, he had decided a decade ago, like he was gonna follow this strict diet. He'd done a bunch of reading, like, and God bless him. But like, he was like normal. He was like, in being not normal, he was like probably the most normal person that I talked to about like feelings.
Do I want to know about the call that went bad, or was it just ugly, rude, mean?
I honestly, I called the guy who had emailed to tell me I was stupid. And like, honestly.
Oh no.
Which was fine. I mean, honestly, it was like not that bad. It was more like, I was surprised he agreed to talk. And then I don't think he realized that like I was going to like bring it up. And like, it was all very cordial. His wife was in the background. I think they were like excited to talk to a reporter. And like, he was telling me about like his diet. And then I did kind of have to say like, okay, but like, why do you think you got so upset about this? And he's like, I didn't get upset. And I was like, we email a stranger, like to call them stupid, like it's different. And he was just kind of like, well, we live in a polarized time and everybody's biased. And he was like, I didn't like your tone. And I was like, well, I didn't like yours either.
Sounds like you and him could have a blossoming friendship.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was like, I think sometimes like the overall lesson, besides like being about like feelings about food, is that like, the internet, it makes it really easy to kind of be a jerk to strangers. And like when we actually have to talk to each other and deal with each other, like most of us are pretty like nice and normal. And like that's kind of the bigger takeaway from me. And like hopefully people stop emailing me about what I'm eating. So I'm tired of thinking about it and talking about it.
Well, to that end, that's all the time we have. We will stop talking about it, Emily, but I've enjoyed discussing it with you. You can read about Emily's experience in her article in Business Insider, where she's a reporter. The article's titled, "My RFK Diet Experiment Went Viral. The Backlash Turned into a Political Food Fight." Emily, it's been a joy chatting with you on the program. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Coming up, the airline policy we've all been waiting for. If your neighbor on the plane blares their music without headphones, United may soon ban them permanently.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Listening to this podcast? Smart move. Being financially savvy? Smart move. Another smart move? Having State Farm help you create a competitive price when you choose to bundle home and auto. Bundling, just another way to save with the personal price plan. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices are based on rating plans that vary by state. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state.
Smart, sharp, and slightly unhinged. Late night's fresh perspective. The last show with David Cooper.
You're sitting on an airplane, and the worst happens. The people to the left and right of you, keep in mind you're in a middle seat, are playing on their tablets, watching videos, maybe they're playing Candy Crush, and the volume is on. They're not wearing headphones. Incredibly rude. Well, there's a new announcement made by United Airlines that might give you a little joy. I am joined by Carmi Levy. It is time for technology time. It's the time of week Carmi comes on the show and we talk about technology. Carmi, welcome to the program.
Good to be with you, David. Thanks for having me.
All right. Airlines banning passengers. It's kind of weird because we feel like we have the right to travel. And yet, if enough private companies decide they don't want to travel with you, you can't get anywhere. But on the other hand, certain bad actors should probably be banned from planes, shouldn't they?
Oh, yeah. I mean, people behaving badly is, this is the scourge of the travel industry. I was in an airport just last week, Miami, And I'm sitting there at the gate waiting for our flight to be boarding. It is delayed, of course, because that's just the way it is. Thank you, Air Canada. And all of a sudden I hear this really loud noise coming from just behind me. And I look over my shoulder and there's this woman and she's holding her phone right in front of her, kind of like this, like she's talking to the speakerphone. But she's also using her other hand to flip from one video to another. She's clearly watching TikTok videos. And one after the other for an hour at top volume. And literally everyone sitting there in the gate just looked at her like dirty looks. She ignored them all and continued on her merry way. It was the most annoying thing on planet Earth. Why she couldn't buy or use a pair of headphones or buds or whatever, I do not know. But it's like, I have my phone. I'm going to use it on speaker. I don't care. It's 2026. I don't know why people behave this way.
Well, and there's this great, paradox where the kinds of people that are willing to be that socially deviant are the kinds of people where if you say, hey, excuse me, could you turn that down? You could get a violent, rude, ruckus public interaction. So it's like you'd like to think you'd be the person that would say, hey, turn it down. But the people that aren't turning it down are exactly the kind of people you might not want to mess with in public.
Yeah, and that's why I said nothing. I pulled out my AirPods. I made sure that active noise cancellation was on, and I stuck them in my ears, and I continued on my merry way. But it kind of reminded me of like the standards for what is and is not acceptable in public clearly have shifted. But at the same time, in an earlier era, you might have said something, but today you just never know. And so the typical Canadian that I am, I just kind of put my head down and minded my own business and slowly stewed until we boarded the plane. Thankfully, she wasn't on our plane. She wasn't even at the gate for this flight. So what she was doing there, I don't know. But again, like you're in public, behave. But I guess in this day and age, that doesn't seem to be the way for most people.
It used to be like once a year we got an exciting video of someone behaving badly on a plane and freaking out and being removed by airline staff, maybe even the cops. And it was like, the internet went wild for it. Now it seems like a new one exists every day. It seems like since the pandemic, the level of behavior on flights has just gone worse and worse and worse. And it's like, what are the airlines doing about it? And enter our story now, United Airlines is basically saying, we can temporarily or permanently ban you. That's according to their contract of carriage. Is that how I say that? If you do this, if you don't wear headphones and you play Candy Crush on volume 101 sitting in a seat, I do think temporary ban for first offense, maybe like a 6-month ban and then permanent maybe is a little more like, I don't like the idea of banning people from flights for life. Then they can't visit their families because I do believe people can learn from their mistakes, but I am for the policy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense to draw a line in the sand, and I think it's a good thing to put it in writing. In this case, it's the contract of carriage or the terms of use or terms of service, whatever they want to call it. It is a contract, and these are the rules that the airlines established to ensure safe, secure passage for everyone. And if you don't adhere to them, you lose that right. I'm pleased to see it in writing. What I'm really concerned about, though, is whether they're actually going to enforce it. They're happy to give you a free pair of earbuds if you want, which I think is great. They won't plug into most phones available today because phones no longer have plugs for earbuds. They're all wireless, but you can certainly use the onboard systems if you want. Just plug it into the screen in front of you if your plane has one. But that's the thing is, are they going to empower flight attendants and other staff, whether on the grounds or in the air, to enforce this rule and put up with what may very well become an out-of-control situation, put up with viral videos where, passengers are beating on staff because they had the temerity to say, please put these headphones in. I don't see that happening. I don't see airlines allowing their employees to become enforcers of these rules. I think it gives them good PR to have these rules in place. I don't think it really changes much unless they're willing to enforce them.
Our next story involves some breaking news. I don't know if you've heard this, but the Trump administration announced some tariffs globally on many countries. This is brand new news as of 1 year ago, Carmi. But if jokes aside, bringing it a little more current, these tariffs were challenged. The Supreme Court of the U.S. struck down at least the global tariffs that the Trump administration tried to put out. I think some of the tariffs are still in place, but the global tariff has been at least struck down by the Supreme Court. Is my understanding correct there before we proceed?
Yeah, so the Supreme Court struck down the global tariffs under the executive orders that he was using under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, but the sectoral tariffs, so on steel and aluminum and stuff like that, still apply. And of course, now in response to the Supreme Court, the president has now enacted other tariffs using different laws that also will inevitably be challenged in court.
Annoying, but whatever. The one company that was particularly affected by the global tariffs is everyone's favorite video game company, Nintendo. Now, I can see why a lot of these large corporations would be reticent to stand up against the federal government in the U.S. to try to not attract too much attention to them. But Nintendo has taken the bold move to try to claw back some of the money they lost, taking the Trump administration to court. Do you think Nintendo is going to get this money back? Do you think the Switch 75 console or whatever is available, what are they on now, Switch 2? Well, the prices will drop? Like, what do we think is going to happen here?
Well, yeah, they're suing them in the U.S. International Court of Trade. They're specifically targeting the Department of Treasury, Homeland Security, and U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Basically, they're saying, give us our money back. And Nintendo was one of the first companies to raise its prices. They had to increase the price of the Switch last August. Switch 2 is still the same price, but they launched it during this period. It was already significantly expensive. So I think tariffs are already built in there. And I think the fact that they're not an American company, they're based in Japan. And so I don't think they're worried as much about an American tech company, about retribution from the White House by suing them. And I think they can swing for the fences. And certainly there's global support for this. And I would expect that other global technology companies that have also incurred additional costs because of these tariffs are likely going to take similar action in the months to come. And I look forward to it. I say bring it on. Let the business world push back on what has essentially been just an incredibly damaging chapter in economic history.
Do we think other companies are going to step up and try to get their money back? Is the government claiming, oh, we can't give it back because it's too confusing and we have too much of a paper? Like, what are the excuses? Like, why aren't they giving the money back to begin with?
They're dragging their feet on this. U.S. Customs and Border Protection says that they're working on a system to process refunds, but they're not giving a timeline. They're not sharing any details. They're not engaging in any kind of dialogue. So everyone is just kind of forced to hold their breath and hope that the U.S. government refunds them in a timely manner. Don't hold your breath too long. So I think that's the thing, is that they're hoping to make this go away just by not acting on it. And I would expect Nintendo will be the first of many such companies to go to the courts and say, we're not waiting for you, Customs and Border Patrol. We're going to sue.
Now, if these companies are successful, most, maybe not all, but most, I don't think will reduce their prices. They'll just take it as extra profit. This is what happens. The consumers, deal with price inflation, deal with things getting more expensive. And then once we've accepted it, even if these companies can produce these products cheaper, they keep the price the same way. Maybe Nintendo won't do this, but others will, I think.
Oh, yeah. Don't expect prices to drop anytime soon. Certainly the war over Iran isn't helping an already tenuous situation. It's only going to get worse from here. Save your pennies.
All right, when we come back from the break, Apple has announced a completely new product class, and they're calling it the iPad keyboard. Sorry, they are not calling that at all. They have launched a 13-inch new Mac they call the MacBook Neo, but is it just an iPad with a keyboard? I'm not so sure. We're here with Carmi Levy. It is time for Technology Time. We'll tell you all about this new device, and maybe you can figure out whether you want one in a moment.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Exploring both interstellar and interpersonal space-time continuums. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Carmi Levy, tech analyst, is here to discuss Apple's brand new product announcement, the iPad keyboard. It is not called that at all. It is called the MacBook Neo, but is it just an iPad with a keyboard? That's what we'll discuss. Regardless, it's a discount laptop, a completely new product. Carmi, welcome to the show.
Good to be with you. Yeah, I mean, that was my first thought, is that, well, now I don't need to buy an iPad anymore because this basically is a grown-up iPad. It even runs the same chip, the A18 Pro, that the iPhone 16 Pro used from last year. So it is essentially architecturally an iPad. It just happens to run Mac OS. And it addresses a lot of the concerns that a lot of people have been saying about Macs, that the entry-level sort of price point is too high. You can buy a Windows machine for, around $800 in Canada, $500 in the US, but you certainly can't buy a Mac. In Canada, it's $1,500 to get into the cheapest MacBook Air. So it's the first time in basically ever that Apple has really decided to sell a budget MacBook. And to a certain extent, I mean, there are certainly lots of compromises in the engineering, but it's getting a lot of buzz. Like, for a lot of people who are looking for just a quick and cheap and dirty way to get into a Mac and don't want to build up an iPad, buy a keyboard, buy a case, at which point you probably should have just bought a Mac anyway. This is an alternative to them, and they will sell truckloads of these things in the months to come.
Now, I remember, 15, 20 years ago, a new product class of laptops was announced called the Netbook. And they were basically just like underpowered mini laptops that were just sold for like web browsing and basic tasks. This whole product category kind of was an utter failure. But I do wonder, was it because this product class, there was no demand for it, or because the chips and the internals were just so lousy compared to regular computers in that era? That's why they failed. So I do wonder, will the MacBook Neo fail the way the Netbook failed because like consumers don't want it? Or are the chips that they're putting in there, despite being underpowered, are they powerful enough to provide like a usable laptop experience? I'm of the belief that this product vertical will succeed, but I do wonder, has Apple not learned from the lessons of the past? Have they taken into account the lessons of the past? This is my question for this new product.
Yeah, and I mean, the worry is, and I used a netbook for a while because I was given one, and it was a terrible experience.
I had one too. They were garbage, but it's all I could afford in undergrad.
Yeah. Right price, wrong technology, because they were just ridiculously underpowered, almost deliberately hobbled from the factory. And that was the worry about the MacBook Neo, is that it uses an iPhone chip, but it only has 8 gigs of RAM, not the minimum 16 that you think most computers would use today. It lacks a number of other features, right? The webcam is only HD, is 1080p. It doesn't have a backlit keyboard. It doesn't have a Thunderbolt port. It's just USB-C. Like, there are just a lot of reasons, a lot of compromises to hit that price point. But it's a different world. And in terms of the initial reviews, anyway, are this thing, at least at a basic level, if you set your expectations right. In other words, if you're not producing video and you're just using it for light work, it's actually not that bad. And it isn't the penalty box that an equivalent cheap Windows laptop would be, because a lot of those Windows laptops are terrible as well. And so the question is does it meet that minimum? And at least initial reviews indicate that, yeah, it certainly does.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I do think Apple will get this right. I think the netbook, it was the wrong time for that kind of product. And the way you describe it, like, right price, wrong technology, or what did you say? Right price, wrong?
Yeah, it was the right price and it was the wrong technology. Yeah. They simply made too many compromises to hit that price point. Whereas with Apple, they have made compromises, but it doesn't seem to hobble the work experience. And so the machine is good enough. You're not going to be sitting there twiddling your thumbs in frustration, waiting for it to catch up. Even with 8 gigs of RAM, even with this so-called, A18 Pro chip, which is essentially a mobile chip, highly efficient, but not terribly powerful, it's good enough for most day-to-day applications, as well as Apple Intelligence, which is what Apple wants all of its devices to support.
Will you be able to run a full operating system on there, or will it be pared down similar to iOS on the phone? Like, will I be able to install whatever I want, open up a command terminal, like have unrestricted access to my own device? Or is it more like an iPhone where you can't install anything unless it's App Store approved?
I think that's the kind of the key sort of win here, is that this is a full version of Mac OS. And so it's, as it runs on a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro, it's the same OS on the MacBook Neo as well, and no compromises there. So if you want to download your own software from the web or go to the App Store or build your own, you absolutely can. It might just run a little bit slower because the hardware is a little less robust than what you would find on an Air or a Pro.
I'm still calling it the iPad keyboard edition.
I like that. I might borrow that if that's okay.
All right, let's go to our next story. A few weeks ago, Carmi, you and I chatted about this bizarro social network online called Moltbook. I imagine like spider carcasses molting or something like this, or snake skin. But it was basically...
It just needs a theme song, that's all.
It was like a Reddit-style social networking website meant for AI chatbots only. It wasn't clear to me whether it was like a joke or a research project or maybe both. And the posts on there were really weird, and they were like this uncanny valley of like almost making sense, but often nonsensical. And it was just this weird curiosity that when you went on there, you came away feeling dumber afterward. But I guess the creators of it aren't so dumb after all, because Meta, the parent company of Facebook, just bought it. I can't actually find out how much they paid for it, but I imagine it wasn't nothing.
Yeah, terms were not disclosed. So was it a few million? Was it a few billion? We don't know. We will watch their next earning call because they will have to disclose it there. But, there's a superpower arms race for the next generation of AI development capability. OpenAI just bought the other half of the Moltbook equation, OpenClaw. They actually hired the founder and the founder of OpenClaw, which is where you create the agents that then get deployed into Moltbook. They're joining their super intelligence labs over at Meta. So all of these companies, these kind of legacy technology companies, are thinking, God, we've got to figure out this AI thing. We either develop it ourselves or we buy the cool, hot, shiny new object technology.
To me, this just seems like grasping at straws, Carmi.
Oh, it
Because
is.
why would they need a weird, bizarro social networking website for bots?
Because Meta AI, which is the AI bot that's built into Facebook and Instagram and other Meta platforms, is frankly terrible. And Meta needs to come up with a new cool party trick. And incorporating AI agents into Meta AI and then deploying it to the billions of people who are using Meta's tools, that is, actually fairly recently that the company has identified as a key strategy for them. And so they want to give Meta AI a brain transplant. Moltbook is what everyone is talking about. Ergo, let's buy Moltbook and just throw it together and see what happens. It is as chaotic as it sounds. It's one of those acquisitions where it almost feels like they sign the deal, the ink isn't even dry, and they'll figure it out later. But what that looks like, what the is a question that I don't think anyone, much less Mark Zuckerberg, can answer now.
So let me try to make sense of this a little bit. It's not so much the bizarro AI social networking platform with its posts that they want. It's this architecture of like agents posting and doing things that interact with a social networking website. It's that kind of tech that you could foresee pivoting into a real product, maybe.
Yeah, it's, we are entering the era of agentic AI. Moltbook is probably the first successful example of that. They've created a network of millions of followers based on this, pretty fast take up. And so what you do is you bring the people responsible for this, in this case, a software developer and his team, and you do what's called an acqui-hire. Bring them in-house, make them part of your team and then see what develops. There almost isn't a plan. You're almost trusting that these smart people will figure it out for themselves.
All right. Well, have you actually been on Moltbook? Have you checked it out? Is what I'm saying about it like being almost usable, but the actual bot posts are like kind of confusing. They are, and disturbing in some way, because there was a lot of crypto, a lot of crime, a lot of scams, digital frauds, trying to create analogs for cyber criminal activity. Yeah. So it, kind of, iffy. But of course, the agents reflect the human world that they're built on. And let's face it, the real world is a pretty scary place as well, filled with, quite frankly, scummy people. So why would digital be any different? Speaking of scummy people, I'm here with not one of them, Carmi Levy, a tech analyst. Carmi, it's been a joy having you on the show. Thanks for going over the tech stories of the day with me.
Really appreciate being with you. Thanks, David.
Coming up next, the differences that we think men and women have with their interest in sex might not be biology. It might all start with what we've learned. Details in a moment.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Please be advised that the following program contains audio content that may be graphic and potentially triggering for some listeners. This content may include descriptions or sounds that some may find disturbing. Listener discretion is strongly advised. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
For years, we've been told men are just naturally more interested in intimacy than women, that there's a libido gap. Men just want more sex. But what if that isn't biologically true at all? What if it's the result of some pretty bad lessons that people are taught at an early age? Well, let's talk about it here with someone who's done research in this area. She's a psychology and brain science researcher and instructor at the University of Toronto. Her name is Diana Peragine. Diana, welcome to the program.
Happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
For decades, this myth of men having high libidos and women not, this not biologically true at all? Like, how big of a myth are we talking about here? And why do people still pretend that this is true?
Right. I mean, well, we're really talking about, when it comes to this gap in particular, I think the myth is really centered on, again, where it comes from, then really the size of the gap, right? You know, this libido gap between genders, it's been a staple of punchlines, headlines, party conversations for decades, right? We're talking about a gender gap that's, it's pretty large, about as large as the gender difference in weight, and one that's, pretty reliable. It's been replicated across, 500 or more studies in the past 25 years alone. And across that, long and sort of girthy body of research, 3 of 4 women do report less interest in sex than men. The question is, or I think the controversy is more about where that gap is coming from, right? Is it a natural one, or is it something that, we acquire over time?
Is it learned, or is it just somehow innate in, we're born with it for whatever reason, I guess is the question. So is it learned is my question.
Right. I mean, it is a good question. I mean, the traditional or the sort of classical view, right, has kind of been that, this is something that we can chalk up to biological differences that are kind of programmed before birth, like hormonal ones, for example, right? Or, some have actually more recently kind of chalked it up to experiential differences or learned differences that we acquire as adults. Gender differences in sexual enjoyment are among the largest documented in psychology, right? And the orgasm gap is actually increasingly discussed as, one of the possible explanations for women's lower interest in sex. But, what we don't discuss quite as much or even acknowledge really is the largest orgasm gap or the largest sexual enjoyment gap on record, which is the one between adolescents, actually, the one that lands the very start of sexual life and actually may land during a critical period for learning about sex and whether sex is worth desiring.
When I learned about sex as a young kid, like in school, it was about pregnancy and STIs and consent and like human body parts. We didn't really focus on pleasure. Is that lack of conversation for kids who are learning about sex? Like, is that where this stems from?
I would say that's definitely a part of it. I mean, but I think a common misconception as well is that pleasure is missing from the curriculum entirely. It's actually, something that is included in even the most, conservative curricula, but only for a privileged few, right? I mean, lessons on puberty, those touch on wet dreams, erections, ejaculations for boys, but for girls, they center on menstruation. Likewise, lessons on procreation, those necessarily include the role of the male sexual pleasure organ in orgasm, but instead of the female one, they spotlight the birth canal, right? So should it really be all that surprising that young people, prioritize vaginas versus vulvas during sex when sex educators do the same during lessons, right? How might young people ask about pleasure, maybe learn to question its absence if they, never learn about its importance for female people, or that, its lack precludes healthy sex, right?
Is the premise here that if we change the way we talked about sex and learned about sex, that there wouldn't be this kind of like desire gap showing up in older age? Is that kind of what we're getting at here?
I think so, definitely. I mean, we have to consider, too, when it comes to education about sex, certainly there's formal education, but there's also sort of the lived sexual experiences that young people are having, which teach them a lot about whether sex is going to be enjoyable, whether it's going to be equitable, and whether it's worth desiring, right? In addition to this kind of missing curriculum of sexual pleasure in the classroom for girls, for young women, there's also this sort of hidden curriculum in their real lives of sort of sexual frustration, of, disappointing sex when it doesn't, devolve into being something that's downright painful or scary, that, might guide them away or sort of train them away from sexual desire at a very early age when these lessons are maybe likely to last.
I was in high school in the 90s. I was around when like the narratives weren't great for like they were very different for each gender, and maybe that is the problem. Maybe like how could we intervene to make sure that like people are enjoying sex into their adulthood, men and women equally?
Right. I think that that's a great question. And I think that to kind of get at the answer to that, we kind of maybe have to break down, how different sex is for, young people, relative across genders and, across sort of life stages, relatively speaking, right? I mean, when we say a lot that women, we tend to say that women get worse sex than men, right? And maybe there is some contribution this makes to that libido gap, but, they actually get the worst sex to start with, right? As I mentioned, the orgasm gap at women's first exposure to sex, that's about, it's the largest one sort of documented. It's about 5 times larger than the orgasm gap between adults. That makes headlines, right? And that pleasure gap at first intercourse, that's remained stable over 3 decades, even as women's adult sort of sexual experiences have improved, right? And that gender gap has narrowed in pleasure at that time in life. Also, gender gap in stimulation of the, primary sexual pleasure organ, that penile glands for men, clitoral glands for women. That pleasure gap, sure, it's large during heterosexual sex in adulthood, but it's twice as large at those first sexual experiences that women have. Painful sex, rough sex, forced sex, those are all more likely to occur the younger women are, whereas that trend doesn't really hold for younger men. Women also tend to lose friendships as they gain sexual experience, whereas men don't suffer similar losses. In fact, quite the reverse. And obviously, you can top all of that off with greater odds or greater risk of unplanned pregnancy, sexually transmitted infections, obstetric complications for women at those younger ages that don't carry over to younger men, that, really make the costs and benefits of sex really probably the most imbalanced across the entire lifespan for young women during this period of time.
So there's like all this social stuff, there's the education stuff, there's I guess like body self-consciousness stuff that where I think young women experience more than men. It sounds like a confluence of all these things, like a perfect storm, I think you call it, existing, and what it ends up being is a pleasure gap at young age that just extends into old age. How do we fix it? Like, I have a good understanding of the problem now. How do we fix it?
Right. I mean, I also do want to stress, though, too, before we get into fixing it, sort of how important it is to target these experiences at this particular window of time, right? I mean, interest in sex, it first comes online in adolescence. It's a hallmark of adolescence, sexual experimentation. It's, normative from a sort of demographic standpoint. It's expected from an evolutionary one that will, behave sexually at this time. In the same way that, it's inspected almost in the same way that the infant brain is expected, it expects to be exposed to language, to attachment figures, and might be primed to learn from them, right? But most importantly, our adolescent sexual experiences, and this is where we get to the brain side of the equation, actually tend to coincide with this really interesting window of brain development where the reward circuits that underpin emotion, motivation, where those circuits mature faster than the sort of cognitive control circuits that inhibit them. And this, this imbalance endows positive emotional experiences with, special salience, special persistence in memory. I mean, the films, the books, the movies the events that we like the best, that we remember the best as adults. They're often the ones that we discover in adolescence and early adulthood. So if this reminiscence bump or this memory bump extends to other sources of pleasure, like our very first experiences with sex, they may be the most memorable ones that we ever have and might actually pattern our interest in sex as adults.
Sounds like we got to change our culture entirely is basically what we're getting at here. Well, Diana, that's all the time we have. Thanks so much for being on the show and sharing your research with me.
Thanks so much.
Coming up next, the psychology research that says sharing misinformation on the internet feels good to those who share it. So why do smart people fall for this? Details on the other side of the break.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. When the day is done, we're just getting started. The last show with David Cooper.
We all would like to think we're too smart to fall for misinformation, but here's an uncomfortable truth. The stuff that spreads the fastest online often feels like the most satisfying to believe, and even more satisfying to share. That stuff is the stuff that's not true. And by spreading it, you're convincing others to spread it. And we're here with someone who's done research into how misinformation spreads. His name is Wes Regan. He's an urban researcher specializing in communication at the University of British Columbia. Wes, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, David.
I've seen friends share misinformation online, stuff that I see and I'm like, that's obviously not true. I look it up, poorly cited, weird websites, but I don't think that they're evil masterminds. I think they're helping. I think they think they're spreading what is true. Why does sharing something like that feel so good in the moment to the people who do?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think as we have begun to see the effect of misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theories on public discourse and on democracy, a lot of research is starting to turn more attention to this. And I think there's some really good research coming out of the U.S. Kaylin O'Connor and James Weatherall, for example, had a great book that came out a number of years ago called The Misinformation Age, How False Beliefs Spread. And they really turned attention to the social aspects of this. So a lot of times, we tend to believe that people will believe misinformation or spread misinformation because of personal reasons. But actually, what their work shows and what others have shown is that there are a lot of social factors in this. It's peer, networks, it's belonging, it's professional affiliations, it's political affiliations. And with social media, we've seen audiences segment and go into little bubbles of affirmation where it feels good to be a part of a group of people who believe a certain way or have a certain worldview. And so we're seeing epistemic polarization along with political polarization and people just really, finding information that confirms their beliefs often and reaffirms that social connection.
I've talked about this on the show before, but I think it's worth saying again, the definition of misinformation versus disinformation, because the two get used interchangeably, and misinformation kind of is the goal of disinformation. But before we get into that, do you want to just give me a brief definition of the two?
Yeah. So misinformation will be just factually incorrect or misleading information that is, often shared, as you alluded to in the intro, often shared with good intentions. So we might believe that bracelet is going to prevent, COVID, or, this particular clothing item is going to increase your whatever metabolism or something by X amount, when in fact there might not be any, scientific validation of those claims. And yet you want to help your grandma or mom or friend or whoever it is. And so, or you yourself might want to believe that that's going to help because you're looking for something. And so you might be inclined to share that, thinking that this looks credible maybe, or has a whiff of credibility. So let's go with it. Whereas disinformation would be a little more nefarious, and that's often spread by state actors or other powerful interests who are really looking to shape beliefs and discourse, and oftentimes with the goal of undermining our trust in democratic institutions or each other for that matter. And I actually specialize mostly in how conspiracy theory beliefs as a form of misinformation or sometimes disinformation can undermine discussions on urban change and what's happening in communities, and make it difficult for urban planners to go in and have meaningful discussions about what's happening in cities with people.
Got it. And then disinformation would be someone who's sharing something knowingly that is false. Like maybe it's the bracelet company. They know their bracelet doesn't work to prevent COVID, but they want to sell these things. So they publish an article, and then you innocently enough reshare it. So, and then your network now believes it, and it's got that credibility because you've shared it.
Yeah, or to undermine trust in rigorously tested vaccines, or to undermine trust in Canada's healthcare system, or to some sort of agenda that is going to have a negative impact on society. And trust is an important part of what keeps a democratic society functioning. Trust in each other, a belief that our neighbors are not, craven, awful, immoral people, but are also, also want to see what's good for the country, even if they might have a different idea of what the policy might be for that thing, or trust in scientific expertise or other sorts of technical expertise, which we rely on because we can't individually make sense of everything. We have to have trusted sources And this is often where I think social media influencers and content creators really muddy the waters in terms of, what we can believe when we come in contact with information online.
Now, back to the crux of what we're talking about, why misinformation feels good to share online. Is it basically the junk food of information? Like it tastes great to us, it feels great to share it, but when we do, it's got like adverse effects to, I don't know, civic health or something?
Yeah, there's an affective quality to this. So, we don't just think rationally when we're faced with information. We also have bodily feelings and intuition, emotions that are involved in how we process that information. And there's definitely beta endorphins or other chemicals that are being released when we're seeing something, we read something, we share something. And so yes, like oftentimes having a community of belief, for example, with conspiracy theories, and having people that will share things that continue to validate a worldview that you hold that might be inherently distrustful towards pharmaceuticals or government elites or whoever it might be. That can be a very good feeling to know that you're not alone in thinking that something is up here, and there's these other forms of evidence, we'll say, quote unquote, that suggest that you're correct in those beliefs, and these other people here believe it, so surely you must be onto something, and yeah, that can feel good.
So if I hold a conspiratorial belief, like, I don't know, let's pick something way out there, like drinking, what's that, colloidal silver is good for my health, even though it like turns you blue and can cause cancer or whatever. If I see an article that says it's good for me, I get that aha moment, like I knew it. And that feels good to then share, to show others that what I believed, whether it was true or not, felt good.
Yeah, that's kind of how it works. But what would be even more powerful is if you were in a social media bubble in which a bunch of other people were sharing affirming stories on their experiences with colloidal silver and sharing
I picked such
articles.
a weird example.
And, yes, you did. But you know what? That's the internet, and it's full of really weird examples because human beings are weird by nature. We definitely are interesting. And so, yes, it's validating, it's community building, and it's reaffirming. And we need those things, as human beings. They feel good. It feels good to belong. It feels good to think that you know something, especially if it's a hidden truth, a hidden knowledge, something that other people don't know, that you and a few others have discovered. You have access to special knowledge.
I'm glad we're talking about this now because this stuff was bad before AI, and we need to be chatting about it because with AI impersonation, the ability to fake videos, fake audio, fake stuff that looks increasingly real. Do you worry about this? Is this problem just getting worse?
I do. What I worry most about with AI is that we are going to turn to AI for all of our answers instead of turning to each other. And that is going to create more alienation, disconnection, and polarization. And that includes polarization around what is true, what we believe, and values that we hold.
Is there any way to fight misinformation? There's a piece of research about this unlikely source combating misinformation. For example, if I'm someone who holds a conspiratorial belief, I post about it, but someone challenges me. Can anyone get through to me?
Yeah, I think that might be Adam Berinsky at MIT that you're thinking of there. And his research has shown that, oftentimes when we get in these habits of self-referential bits of evidence and validating bubbles, that rather than hearing misinformation refuted by someone who you'd expect it to be. So a public health officer is going to refute, vaccine skepticism. You hear it from someone who's maybe more like your social bubble, someone who's maybe more conservative or more on the business side of things as opposed to the government side of things. And that actually, it can be an important part of why you might believe that source over someone you are inherently more skeptical or wary of.
Wes Regan is an urban researcher specializing in communication at the University of British Columbia. Wes, I've enjoyed the chat. Thanks for chatting with me.
Thanks, David.
That's a wrap on the show. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We're on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Our handle is lastshow.pizza. If you follow us, you can see video clips of this radio show. You can watch the fascinating experts we have explain their big ideas while I try to derail them with dumb questions. I'm David Cooper. This was The Last Show.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistant's assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.